Hey everyone, this is Forgetting Scrolls. What if I told you that the very first civilization on Earth didn't just survive, they revolutionized the world. They invented writing, the wheel, and even the concept of cities. All thousands of years before anyone else, the Sumerians appeared out of nowhere with knowledge so advanced, historians are still scratching their heads. Were they just extraordinary geniuses? Or did they have help from something or someone else? Dive in and uncover their mysteries. Picture the Fertile Crescent around 4000 BCA. Scattering of simple mud brick villages where farmers tended barley fields along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These Ubaid people lived much like their ancestors had for generations. No cities, number writing, no centralized government. Then something extraordinary happened. Within just a few centuries, their descendants would build urban centers unlike anything the world had seen. By 3000 BC, settlements like Ur and Uruk transformed into complex city-states with populations reaching 50,000. The change happened so abruptly it defies easy explanation. One moment humans lived in egalitarian farming communities, the next, they constructed massive temples, developed specialized labor, and established rigid social hierarchies. Archaeologists often find this transition puzzling because it lacked the gradual development phases seen in other early civilizations. Walk through the ruins of Uruk's White Temple today, and you'll see the scale of their ambition. The structure sat atop a 40-foot-high platform. Its corners aligned to the cardinal directions with precision that suggests advanced astronomical knowledge. The city walls stretched nearly 6 miles in circumference, built with baked bricks that required sophisticated kill technology. These weren't just larger villages, they represented an entirely new way of human organization. The Sumerians didn't build haphazardly. Excavations revealed deliberate urban planning with standardized bricks, carefully engineered drainage systems, and separate districts for craftspeople, priests, and administrators. Their cities functioned like intricate machines, with each component serving a specific purpose in the larger system. At Ur, archaeologists uncovered a massive harbor complex connected to an extensive canal network, evidence of coordinated labor on an unprecedented scale. Consider the workforce needed for such projects. Someone had to feed these builders, which required surplus agriculture enabled by irrigation systems. Others had to manufacture tools, transport materials, and oversee construction. This level of specialization implies centralized authority, record-keeping, and resource distributional hallmarks of modern civilization, appearing suddenly in the archaeological record. The mystery deepens when you examine their defensive structures. Cities like Kish featured walls with projecting towers and reinforced gates, innovations that wouldn't become common elsewhere for over 1,000 years. These weren't simple barriers, but sophisticated fortifications designed by someone who understood siege warfare long before most cultures had standing armies. Archaeologists have a term for this rapid transformation, the urban revolution. But the label doesn't explain how or why it occurred, specifically in Sumer. Other river valley civilizations, like Egypt and the Indus Valley, took centuries longer to develop comparable complexity. The Sumerians appear to have skipped developmental stages, going from village life to urban sophistication almost overnight in historical terms. Some theorize environmental pressures, forced innovation, perhaps unpredictable flooding necessitated large-scale cooperation. Others point to trade networks bringing new ideas from distant regions. But these explanations struggle to account for the sheer breadth of Sumerian advancements across architecture, governance, and technology simultaneously. The most baffling aspect isn't what they built, but how quickly their society transformed. In the span of just 10 to 15 generations, humans went from living in small agricultural communities to constructing ziggurats that touch the sky. That's like going from the first steam engine to the internet in a single century, a pace of change that seems impossible without some catalyst we've yet to identify. Modern excavations continue to uncover surprises at sites like Lagash, where recent LiDAR scans revealed an extensive buried city grid. Each discovery reinforces how radically different Sumerian cities were from anything before them. Their street layouts show careful consideration of traffic flow. Their residential districts exhibit early zoning concepts, and their public spaces suggest a sophisticated understanding of urban psychology. Perhaps most telling are the artifacts. Left behind not just pottery fragments, but intricate cylinder seals used for bureaucratic record-keeping. These small engraved stones hint at the emergence of complex administration. Some bear cuneiform markings that would later evolve into writing, showing how their innovations built upon one another in accelerating fashion. The transition wasn't purely technological either. Burial evidence reveals new social stratification elites interred with gold and lapis lazuli, while commoners had simple graves. This suggests the rise of economic inequality alongside architectural achievements, the flip side of civilizations. Coin emerging simultaneously. By the time Egypt's Old Kingdom built its first pyramids, Sumerian city-states had already flourished for centuries. Their head start seems inexplicable until you consider that every subsequent civilization borrowed from their innovations. The wheel, the sailboat, the plow appear, first in Sumer, then spread outward like ripples in a pond. Yet the fundamental question remains unanswered. What combination of geography, leadership, and circumstance enabled this extraordinary leap forward? The more we learn about early Sumer, the more its rapid rise defies conventional models of cultural evolution. Their technological breakthroughs be impressive enough on their own bet. As we'll see next, the Sumerians were just getting started. The invention that would truly cement their place in history wasn't made of brick or bronze, but something far more enduring. Marks in wet clay that could speak across millennia. The earliest known writing doesn't contain epic poetry or divine prophecies. It records barley deliveries. Around 3400 BC, Sumerian accountants pressed reeds into wet clay to track commodity exchanges. These simple notches and pictographs mark humanity's first experiment with symbolic communication, a system born from economic necessity rather than artistic expression. At first, these tokens and tablets served strictly practical purposes. Temple administrators needed to track grain stores, livestock counts, and labor allocations. The earliest examples look like primitive spreadsheets, row after row of cuneiform. Symbols denoting quantities of wheat, sheep, or jars of oil. One tablet from Uruk lists expenditures of bread and beer for temple workers down to the exact loaf and jug. The transformation from counting marks to full writing happened gradually. Early pictographs representing objects slowly became more abstract. A drawing of a bull's head simplified to just 2 crossed lines. The same symbol could then represent the sound of the word bull in other contexts. By 3000 BC, scribes had developed about 1,000 standardized signs that could record not just inventories, but contracts, laws, and eventually literature. What began as bookkeeping evolved into something far more powerful. Writing allowed Sumerian cities to centralize authority in ways previously impossible. Temple administrators could now issue standardized instructions across vast territories. Rulers codified laws that applied equally to distant provinces. Merchants recorded complex business deals involving multiple partners and extended timelines. The volume of surviving tablets reveals how thoroughly writing permeated Sumerian society. Archaeologists have uncovered over 500,000 cuneiform texts to date. Many come from administrative archives where scribes filed receipts and ledgers with bureaucratic precision. Others preserve school exercises, endless copies of signs made by apprentice scribes practicing their craft. Unlike later alphabetic systems, cuneiform required extensive training. Scribes spent years memorizing hundreds of complex signs. The best graduates rose to prestigious positions managing temple finances or royal correspondence. This education system created the world's first educated elite class, with exclusive access to information management. The Sumerians didn't merely invent writing, they developed all its accompanying technologies. They baked clay tablets for permanent records, stored them in organized archives, and even created envelope tablets, where important documents were sealed inside outer layers. Some contracts included spaces for witnesses, seals and signatures, legal conventions we still use today, writing's impact extended beyond bureaucracy. For the first time, knowledge could accumulate beyond what any single person remembered. Medical texts recorded herbal remedies. Astronomical observations tracked celestial cycles, and building plans could be shared across generations. This created an explosion of specialized knowledge that accelerated technological and cultural development. Curiously, the Sumerians themselves seemed unaware of writing's revolutionary potential at first. For centuries, they restricted it to dry accounting before realizing it could capture speech, stories, and ideas. The earliest known literary text appears around 2600 BC, about 800 years after the first economic tablets. Cuneiform's durability explains why so many examples survive. Unlike perishable papyrus or parchment, baked clay tablets withstand centuries underground. Archaeologists continue finding new specimens that reshape our understanding of ancient Mesopotamia. A single discovery can add dozens of previously unknown words to the Sumerian lexicon. No other invention better demonstrates Sumer's organizational genius. Writing allowed them to administer large populations, collect taxes efficiently, and maintain complex trade networks. Other civilizations would adopt and adapt their system, but the core concept remained unchanged for millennia. Yet for all its sophistication, cuneiform had limitations. The script mixed logographic and phonetic elements in ways that made it cumbersome. Reading required memorizing numerous sign variations, where the same symbol could represent different words or sounds depending on context. This complexity may explain why it eventually gave way to simpler alphabetic systems. The transition from concrete accounting to abstract literature reveals how writing reshaped human thought itself. Early tablets list objects by physical characteristics: large oxen, small bulls, red wool. Later texts express intangible concepts like justice, love, and divine will. This cognitive leap allowed new forms of philosophy, law, and storytelling to emerge. Ironically, the very bureaucrats who created writing to control resources inadvertently birthed civilization's most liberating technology. What began as a tool for counting grain became humanity's most potent means of sharing ideas across time and space. The same tablets tracking beer rations would eventually preserve epic poetry and scientific knowledge for posterity. Sumerian scribes developed conventions we still follow today. They wrote left to right in horizontal lines, separated words with spaces, and standardized numerical notation. Their filing systems organized tablets by subject and date principles underlying modern libraries and databases. Even the concept of signing one's name originated with their cylinder seals. The invention's timing raises intriguing questions. Why did writing emerge in Sumer first, when other complex societies existed? Geography likely played a role the need to manage. Irrigation systems and redistribute harvests created organizational pressures absent elsewhere. But the full answer remains as enigmatic as wedge-shaped marks on a clay tablet. This revolutionary technology didn't spread quickly. Nearly 1,000 years passed before Egypt developed hieroglyphs, and even longer before writing appeared in the Indus Valley. The delay suggests Sumer's system wasn't obviously superior, just uniquely suited to solve their specific administrative challenges first. Deciphering cuneiform gave modern scholars unprecedented access to an ancient civilization's inner workings. Unlike pyramid builders whose motives we must guess, the Sumerians left detailed records of their laws, economy, and even personal correspondence. A merchant's complaint about late copper shipments, or a student's doodles in the margin make them feel startlingly contemporary. The most remarkable aspect isn't that they invented writing, but what they chose to record, alongside dry accounting. Tablets, we find hymns to gods, heroic tales, and even early philosophy. One text debates whether summer or winter is better for humanity. It's perhaps the world's first written, intellectual discussion. No single artifact better encapsulates Sumer's duality than the Standard of Yore. This elaborate box depicts war on one side and peace on the other, using mosaics of shell and lapis lazuli. Similarly, their writings served both practical record-keeping and lofty cultural expression, a combination that defined civilization itself. What began as scratches in clay became humanity's most transformative technology until the printing press. The Sumerians couldn't have foreseen how their accounting tool would enable everything from religious scriptures to scientific journals. Yet in creating writing, they built the foundation for all recorded knowledge to follow. The system's longevity testifies to its effectiveness. Cuneiform remained in use for over 3,000 years, longer than any other writing system in history. Even as spoken Sumerian died out, later empires continued using its script to record unrelated languages. Like the wheel, it proved so useful that successive cultures adapted rather than replaced it. Excavations still uncover new tablets annually, each adding pieces to the puzzle of early Mesopotamia. Recently translated texts reveal previously unknown aspects of Sumerian law, medicine, and daily life. Yet the full archive likely represents just a fraction of what they produced. Most tablets crumbled long ago or still lie buried. Now consider what came next. While scribes were busy perfecting writing, Sumerian craftsmen were revolutionizing another fundamental technology, one that would literally set civilization in motion. The wheel waited just around the historical corner, ready to transform transportation, pottery, and warfare forever. The first known wheel didn't roll, it spun. Around 3500 BC, Sumerian potters began using a simple rotating platform to shape symmetrical vessels. This humble turntable would become one of humanity's most transformative technologies, though its creators couldn't have imagined its eventual uses. The innovation allowed mass production of identical bowls and jars at speeds impossible by hand. Archaeologists find these early wheel-made pots across Mesopotamia, their uniform curves and thickness betraying their mechanical origin. Evidence suggests the transition from potter's wheel to vehicle axle happened within a few centuries. By 3200 BC, Sumerian artwork depicts sledges mounted on rolling platforms. The leap from stationary pottery wheel to mobile transportation wasn't obvious. It required the insight that rotational motion could propel objects forward. The earliest wooden wheels were solid discs carved from planks, heavy but effective. Wagons revolutionized labor, enabling farmers to move harvests and builders to transport stones that previously required dozens of workers. Sumerian metallurgists contributed another breakthrough, copperworking on an industrial scale. At sites like Tel Brak, archaeologists uncovered workshops producing standardized tools and weapons. Smiths developed lost wax casting techniques to create intricate objects, from chisels to figurines. Their furnaces reached temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius, hot enough to smelt copper from raw. This temperature control demonstrates sophisticated understanding of pyrotechnology. Centuries before other cultures mastered metalworking, the scale of their copper trade spanned continents. Sumerian texts mention imports from Anatolia in the Indus Valley. While archaeometallurgical analysis confirms some artifacts contain trace elements matching distant mines, this long-distance commerce required standardized weights and measures, prompting another Sumerian innovation, the sexagesimal numbering system. Their base 60 mathematics underlies our modern divisions of time and angles. The system's advantage was divisibility. 60 can be split evenly by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. Metalworkers weren't the only specialists. Textile factories. In your employed hundreds producing woolen fabrics, excavations revealed dyeing vats, weaving implements, and accounting tablets tracking output. Some workshops standardized thread counts per inch, creating fabric of consistent quality for trade. This industrialization occurred 2,000 years before similar manufacturing systems appeared elsewhere. Sumerian engineers applied mechanical principles beyond the wheel. Archimedes' screw, often credited to Hellenistic Greeks, appears in Mesopotamian irrigation systems centuries earlier. Their version used wooden blades and a cylinder to lift water from canals into fields. They also developed corbelled arches for gateways and drainage culvert structural, innovations that wouldn't be improved until Roman times. At the ziggurat of yore, bitumen-sealed terracotta pipes formed an intricate drainage network that prevented flooding during heavy rains. Their medical technology was equally advanced. Texts describe surgical procedures using flint and bronze tools, Physicians prescribed antiseptic wound treatments using alcohol and honey centuries before these methods appeared in Egyptian medicine. Some remedies combined herbs with psychological techniques, early recognition of mind-body connections in healing. The development of wheeled vehicles created new tactical possibilities. By 2600 BC, Sumerians mounted heavy wagons with solid wheels to form early battle carts. These proto-chariots carried spear throwers and drivers protected by leather shields. While cumbersome compared to later horse-drawn chariots, they represented the first mechanized warfare, a terrifying innovation to opposing infantry forces. Artists depicted these war wagons on the standard of yore, showing armored troops trampling enemies under wheel rims. Agricultural technology kept pace with military advances. Sumerian plows evolved from simple digging sticks, two-wheeled seed drills that planted and covered grain in one operation.
Wow.
This increased crop yields while reducing labor. Farmers used shadoof irrigation devices to lift water lever-based machines that remained unchanged until modern times. Their crop rotation systems alternated barley with nitrogen-fixing legumes, a practice only scientifically understood millennia later. Sumerian craft specialization reached remarkable levels. Glassmakers produced colored beads and decorative objects. Using techniques later reinvented by Egyptian artisans, lapidaries drilled intricate holes through hard stones like carnelian to create elaborate jewelry. Even mundane items like sickles and axes show careful ergonomic design. With handles shaped to reduce worker fatigue during long use, their nautical technology opened trade. Routes across the Persian Gulf, red boats coated with bitumen waterproofing, carried tons of cargo, while wooden ships ventured upriver with imported goods. Harbor excavations at Ur reveal a complex of quays and warehouses capable of handling merchant vessels from distant ports. Navigation aids included early star charts and landmark reference points along coastlines. Perhaps most impressive was their technological foresight. Many Sumerian inventions reached their practical limits. Almost immediately, the solid wheel couldn't be improved until someone invented the spoked wheel 2,000 years later. Their metal alloys approached the maximum strength achievable. With available materials, even their mathematics included concepts like place value, notation that wouldn't be fully utilized until much later civilizations. The rapid succession of innovations suggests a culture actively encouraging problem-solving. Unlike incremental advances seen in most ancient societies, Sumerian technology often leaped forward in sudden bursts. The appearance of wheels, metallurgy, and mass production within a few generations indicates exceptional social conditions. Promoting invention. Some technologies remained uniquely Sumerian for centuries. The true potter's wheel, a heavy stone disc that maintained momentum between pushes, doesn't appear elsewhere until over 1,000 years later. Their particular style of arch construction took equally long to spread beyond Mesopotamia.
These
Delays raise questions about whether other cultures failed to adopt superior methods or couldn't replicate Sumer's specialized craftsmen. The materials themselves tell stories of experimentation. Early copper artifacts contain high impurity levels, while later ones show deliberate alloying with tin to create stronger bronze. Glassmaker's trilander becomes obvious in layered samples where colors bled during imperfect firings. Failed inventions provide evidence, like wheels that cracked under stress from overly heavy loads. Technological transfer appears limited despite extensive trade networks. Neighboring cultures adopted some Sumerian inventions selectively. Wheels spread quickly, but metallurgical techniques remained Mesopotamian specialties for generations. This suggests guarded knowledge, perhaps kept secret by guilds of craftsmen protecting their livelihoods. The combined effect of these technologies transformed daily life. A Sumerian farmer used metal tools to till fields, wheel-made pots to store grain, and woven baskets to transport goods-all products of specialized industries. This division of labor allowed societies to support non-food-producing elites, like priests and administrators who drove further innovation. Maintenance of complex technologies required new infrastructure. Wheelwrights needed steady supplies of quality timber. Metalworkers depended on reliable charcoal production for their furnaces. Potters required consistent clay sources and controlled kiln temperatures. Meeting these demands created entire secondary industries, supporting primary manufacturers. What's missing from the archaeological record often proves revealing. The absence of pottery wheels in early villages suggests that technology appeared suddenly, rather than evolving gradually. Likewise, the lack of transitional forms between solid and spoked wheels implies discrete inventive leaps rather than steady improvement. The Sumerians themselves documented technological processes in remarkable detail. Texts describe everything from bronze alloy ratios to proper bricklaying techniques. Leatherworking manuals specify tanning times for different hides. The systematic recording of craft knowledge allowed techniques to survive generations of artisans. Science and technology intertwined in unexpected ways. Astronomical observations facilitated calendar reforms that improved agricultural timing. Mathematics developed for land surveys enabled precise construction projects. Even early chemistry emerged from pottery glazing and metal purification experiments. Rarely has one civilization contributed so many fundamental technologies in such rapid succession. The period between wheel and chariot spans less time than between Newton's laws and spaceflight. This compressed timescale makes Sumer's achievements seem almost unreal, as if their inventors possessed some lost insight into problem-solving we've since forgotten. Yet for all their mechanical ingenuity, the Sumerians' greatest challenges lay not in workshops, but in fields. Controlling unpredictable rivers required engineering of another sort, one that turned seasonal floods into agricultural advantage rather than catastrophe. Their most vital inventions weren't made of wood or bronze, but of earth and water. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers brought both life and chaos to ancient Sumer. Spring floods could arrive without warning, swallowing fields under swirling brown water. Then summer droughts might parch the land into cracked earth. Civilizations had risen and fallen in this region for millennia, until the Sumerians engineered a solution. Their network of canals and dikes turned unpredictable floods into agricultural abundance. Early farmers had tried simple ditch irrigation, but the Sumerians systematized it. They dug primary canals branching off the rivers like ribs from a spine. Smaller channels fed fields at precise gradients, steep enough to keep water moving, gentle enough to prevent erosion. Teams of surveyors used knotted ropes and sighting poles to maintain perfect slopes across miles of terrain. A single miscalculation could mean stagnant water or destructive flooding downstream. The scale of these works still visible from satellite images. Straight-line canals run for dozens of miles, some dating back 5,000 years. Modern engineers note their sophisticated understanding of hydrodynamics, how water behaves in motion. The Sumerians positioned sluice gates where side channels met. Main arteries, controlling flow with woven reed mats weighted with stones. During floods, these could be raised to divert excess water into storage basins. Maintenance required constant labor. Hundreds of workers dredged silt from channel bottoms using woven baskets. They reinforced banks with bundled reeds and packed clay. Tablet records from Lagash detail crews assigned to specific canal sections, with supervisors tracking their progress. This organized upkeep prevented the system from clogging, a lesson later civilizations often neglected to their ruin. The real innovation wasn't the canals themselves, but their integration into civic planning. Sumerian cities positioned themselves along these artificial waterways like beads on a string. Harbors connected to the canal network allowed grain barges to move directly from fields to storage silos. Some settlements even built intracity channels, bringing water directly to temple breweries and public baths. Sumerian farmers developed complementary techniques to maximize their engineered landscape. They planted date palms along canal banks. The trees stabilized the soil while their fruit provided food. Barley grew in checkerboard fields with small berms to contain irrigation water. Crops were rotated between plots to prevent salt buildup, a constant threat in arid climates. This careful land management produced harvests up to 3 times larger than rain-fed agriculture. Water distribution required new social structures. Canals crossed village boundaries, demanding cooperation rather than competition. Early tablets record complex water-sharing agreements between cities. At Umma and Lagash, centuries-long border dispute centered on canal access, one of history's first recorded wars over water rights. The need for collective management may have spurred Sumer's early political centralization. The system's resilience was tested during droughts. Storage reservoirs held emergency supplies, while prioritized distribution kept key industries like pottery kilns operational. During famine years, temple archives show administrators reallocating grain from central stores. This ability to buffer against environmental shocks gave Sumerian cities staying power that simpler settlements lacked. Archaeologists find evidence of constant experimentation. At Tella, excavators uncovered layered sediment showing canals being widened, then narrowed again as engineers sought optimum dimensions. Some later channels have gently curved walls, a design that reduced erosion at turns. This empirical approach contrasts with the rigid traditions of many ancient cultures facing similar challenges. The most impressive structures were the river control points. At key locations, the Sumerians built weirs, low dams that raised water levels just enough to feed canals. These used stacked mats weighted with stones rather than solid barriers, allowing adjustments to flow rates. During peak floods, strategic breaches in weaker sections acted as natural pressure valves, preventing catastrophic failures downstream. Maintenance rituals became religious events. Texts describe ceremonies where priests married the canals to ensure fertility. Offerings were made to Enki, god of fresh water, at critical junction points. This blending of practical engineering with spiritual belief created cultural investment in the systems. Preservation, no small factor in its longevity, the consequences extended beyond agriculture. Reliable food surpluses freed citizens to specialize in crafts, trade, and governance. Trades like metallurgy that required constant fuel could develop, because irrigated fields provided straw for baking bricks and firing kilns. Even the rise of writing connects back to water management. Early tablets track canal labor in grain stores. Some techniques persist today. Modern Iraqi farmers still use variants of the Sumerian shaduf, a counterbalanced lever for lifting water. Traditional irrigation timing follows seasonal schedules first codified in cuneiform manuals. Even the basic organizational principle, central control of dispersed water resources, underpins management of major rivers like the Colorado and Nile. The Sumerians' real breakthrough wasn't technological, but conceptual. They stopped seeing the rivers as forces to fear and began viewing them as systems to control. This shift from passive adaptation to active management marked a revolution in humanity's relationship with nature. Where others built homes on mounds to escape floods, the Sumerians sculpted the landscape itself to their needs. Evidence of their prowess lies in crop yields. Cuneiform records from your describe barley returns of 30-1. 30 grains harvested for every one planted. Modern traditional farming in the same region typically achieves 8-1 at best. This astonishing productivity didn't come from better seeds or tools, but from precision water delivery at every growth stage. Recent soil studies reveal another subtle innovation. Sumerian fields show layers of alternating silt and sand, the result of deliberate sediment management. They deposited nutrient-rich silt exactly where needed while washing away harmful salts. This level of nuanced understanding seems impossibly advanced for the era. The system did have vulnerabilities. Over centuries, rising groundwater brought salt to the surface, gradually reducing fertility. Tablets from later periods note declining yields in efforts to grow more salt-tolerant emmer wheat. Some scholars argue this environmental degradation ultimately contributed to Sumer's decline. A warning about even the most sophisticated systems. What's most remarkable is how quickly they developed these solutions. Within just a few generations of the first cities, the Sumerians went from struggling with unpredictable floods to managing what amounted to a hydraulic machine. The rapidity suggests either extraordinary collective problem-solving or perhaps knowledge passed down from earlier, unrecorded experiments. Modern replicas prove their designs worked. Archaeologists reconstructing Sumerian canals with period-appropriate tools found the water flows exactly as intended. The gradients produce steady currents without erosion, while the gate systems allow precise distribution. These weren't lucky guesses, but products of careful observation and refinement. The legacy extends beyond engineering. Concepts first developed for water management, standardized measurements, resource allocation, coordinated labor, became templates for organizing. Other aspects of society, in controlling the rivers, the Sumerians also developed ways to structure civilization itself. Yet canals alone couldn't sustain cities. Feeding tens of thousands required more than engineering. It demanded new rules for who got what and when. The next revolution wouldn't be in clay or bronze, but in something more abstract, the idea that justice could be written down rather than decided by the strongest. Before Urnamu's time, justice depended on who you knew and how strong you were. Tribal elders made decisions case by case, with punishments varying wildly. The powerful could bully the weak without consequence. Then around 2100 BC, something revolutionary appeared in the city of Ura, list of laws, carved in stone. Where every crime had a fixed penalty, the Code of Urnamu established for the first time that theft, assault, and murder weren't just personal disputes, they were offenses against society itself. Its prologue, preserved on a fragmentary tablet, declares the king's duty to establish equity in the land so the orphan would not fall prey to the wealthy. This wasn't just a legal document, it was a philosophical statement about fairness and social order. 30 surviving laws reveal a sophisticated legal mind. If a man severed another's foot in a fight, he paid 10 silver shekels. False accusations required financial compensation equal to the alleged crime's penalty. These weren't arbitrary fines. They followed careful gradations of injury and intent. Some laws seem remarkably progressive. Rape of a virgin slave carried the same penalty regardless of the victim's social status. Radical concept in an era when human lives had wildly different values. The laws treated different classes differently. But with consistent rules, a nobleman's fine might be AAA commoners for the same offense.
How?
But the principle remained. Punishment corresponded to crime. This predictability allowed citizens to understand consequences before acting, the essence of modern legal systems. What made Sumer develop formal law when other civilizations relied on ad hoc judgments? Complex urban life created new problems. Strangers did business without personal relationships to enforce honesty. Temple administrators needed clear rules to settle disputes between farmers sharing irrigation canals. Writing made it possible to standardize decisions rather than rely on memory or hearsay. The code's physical form mattered as much as its content. Steely displaying laws in public spaces sent a message. Justice no longer happened behind closed doors. Anyone could see. The rules, reducing powerful individuals' ability to manipulate outcomes. This transparency created what we now call rule of law, the idea that society runs on consistent principles rather than personal whims. Later codes refined these concepts, but kept their essence. The better-known Code of Hammurabi, written 3 centuries afterward, owes clear debts to Urnamu's innovations. Both established graduated punishments, protected property rights, and acknowledged different social classes. The key difference lies in severity. Hammurabi's eye for an eye punishments contrast with Urnamu's reliance on fines and restitution. Court records from your show these laws in action. One tablet describes a case where a man paid to sheep for injuring another's nose. The payment matched the code's prescribed penalty exactly. Another records a divorce settlement, where the husband returned his wife's dowry per standard legal procedure. These weren't theoretical ideals they governed. Real lives, women had surprising legal standing under these codes. They could own property, initiate divorces, and operate businesses. A widow could remarry without losing her first husband's estate, provided she raised his children. These rights wouldn't exist in many later societies until modern times. The laws reveal Sumer's economic priorities. Penalties for damaging irrigation canals were severe: 15 shekels for breaching a levee, enough to feed a family for months. This protected the agricultural infrastructure everyone depended on. Temple property received special protections too, with thefts from holy stores punishable by death in later codes. Legal procedure became standardized. Plaintiffs and defendants presented cases before panels of judges. Witnesses testified under oath, invoking the gods' names. Scribes recorded proceedings on clay tablets stored in archives. This created precedent. Judges could consult past rulings for guidance. Much like modern case law, commercial law developed alongside criminal codes. Standardized contracts specified payment terms, delivery dates, and quality expectations. A builder's house collapsed. He had to rebuild it, at his own expense, an early version of liability. Merchants used signed invoices and bills of lading that would look familiar today. Some provisions seem oddly specific. One law addresses situations where a man's ox gores another man's ox, detailing how to divide the dead animal's value. Another regulates fees for medical procedures, setting payment based on the patient's social class. These weren't abstract principles, but practical solutions to daily conflicts. The codes assumed innocence until proof. Accusers bore the burden of evidence, a dramatic shift from trial by ordeal methods used elsewhere. If witnesses disagreed, judges investigated rather than resorting to supernatural signs. This emphasis on fact-finding laid groundwork for evidentiary standards still used in courts. Professional judges emerged as a distinct class. It's no longer just priests or elders. These specialists trained in legal interpretation, precedent analysis, and contract drafting. The system became self-perpetuating. The more complex laws grew, the more experts were needed to navigate them. Punishments aimed more at restitution than retribution. Fines compensated victims rather than merely inflicting pain on offenders. This recognized that crimes harmed society beyond individual victims and insight. Many modern justice systems still struggle to implement. The code's survival through centuries of political change proves its effectiveness. When new dynasties conquered Sumerian cities, they kept the legal framework intact, just as later governments today retain useful laws after elections. Practicality outweighed cultural pride. Good systems withstand regime changes. Modern legal concepts echo these ancient innovations. The idea that laws should be written and publicly available, Yernamu's stele. Standardized punishments based on offense severity, Sumerian court tablets. Specialized judges applying precedent. Scribal schools started it. Even our distinction between civil and criminal cases has roots in how Sumerians separated property disputes from violent crimes. The system wasn't perfect. Slavery remained legal, though codes regulated masters' conduct. Women's rights varied. By city, some allowed female tavern keepers to testify in court, others didn't. Corruption surely persisted despite formal rules. Yet compared to what came before, what would follow in many cultures, it represented extraordinary progress. What's striking is how familiar these concerns feel. Debates over fair punishment, property rights, and judicial impartiality occupy modern legislatures just as they did Sumerian councils. The same tensions between consistency and flexibility, between mercy and deterrence, played out in Ur's courtrooms 4,000 years ago. Archaeologists continue finding legal tablets that refine our understanding. Recent discoveries include appeals court records and scholarly commentaries on tricky cases. This wasn't just simple rule following. It was an ongoing intellectual tradition, grappling with justice's complexities. The laws also served political purposes. Kings used legal reforms to legitimize their rule, presenting themselves as protectors of order. Yernamu's prologue explicitly links his laws to divine approval tactic rulers, still employ when seeking moral authority for policies. Underneath all this lies a profound philosophical shift. The idea that society can shape human behavior through predictable systems rather than brute force. By codifying consequences, Sumerians made coexistence possible among strangers in crowded cities, the foundation of civilization itself. Yet these legal achievements existed alongside deep social inequalities. The same courts that carefully adjudicated property disputes between nobles upheld systems keeping slaves in bondage. This contradiction between progressive principles and harsh realities would persist throughout history. But perhaps recognizing the contradiction itself began at Sumer. Imagine a landscape without trees or stone, just endless mudflats baking under the Mesopotamian sun. This was the challenge Sumerian architects faced when they decided to build monuments reaching toward the heavens. With only clay and reeds at hand, they engineered structures that would dominate their cities' skylines for millennia. The ziggurats. The process began with molding thousands of mud bricks. Workers mixed river clay with straw and packed it into wooden forms. These dried in the sun for days before being stacked into walls. But sun-dried bricks crumble in rain, so the Sumerians developed kill-fired bricks for external layers. One bore the stamp of the king, who commissioned a early form of quality control and political propaganda at Eridu. The earliest known ziggurat rose in stages over centuries. Archaeologists found evidence of 17 separate rebuildings, each larger than the last. The final version stood over 150 feet tall, with a base covering an acre. Laborers moved millions of bricks, using nothing but ramps and sledges. No wheels or pulleys eased their work, just coordinated. Human effort on a staggering scale, the structures weren't solid brick through and through. Engineers saved materials by creating rubble-filled cores with reinforced outer shells. Diagonal buttresses strengthened walls against earthquakes. Waterproof bitumen sealed outer surfaces, while woven reed mats between layers absorbed minor tremors. These techniques allowed ziggurats to survive where later stone towers crumbled. Access was carefully controlled. A single stairway or ramp spiraled up one side, often flanked by guard rooms. Priests alone could ascend to the shrine at the summit, a small chamber housing the city's patron deity. This elevated sanctuary symbolized the god's literal and figurative supremacy over the urban landscape below. Ziggurats aligned with celestial events. The corners of your great ziggurat point toward the cardinal directions with surprising accuracy. Some scholars suggest particular stairways lined up with solstice, sunrises, or the rising of key stars. These alignments would have marked important festival dates, blending astronomical observation with religious ritual. The labor investment was enormous. Cuneiform tablets from your record work gangs of up to 1,500 men employed for months at a time. Some were conscripted citizens serving temporary duty, others permanent skilled workers. They received standardized rations of barley oil, onions, an early example of state-organized labor with fixed compensation. Construction served political as much as religious purposes. Kings used temple building to demonstrate their piety and power. Inscriptions boast of rulers extending the foundations of ziggurats, equating physical height with divine favor. The structures became visual symbols of a city's prestige. The taller the ziggurat, the more important the urban center. Color played a symbolic role. The ziggurat at Ur had a black painted base representing the underworld, a red midsection for the earthly realm, and a white summit symbolizing the heavens. Glazed blue bricks may have adorned the uppermost shrine, mimicking the sky. This color coding guided worshippers through cosmological concepts as they approached the sacred space. The terrace design wasn't just aesthetic. Graduated levels created structural stability while representing tiers of existence. Each platform was smaller than the one below, creating the illusion of greater height when viewed from ground level. The effect made ziggurats appear to scrape the sky. Even with relatively modest dimensions, maintenance was constant. Rain eroded mudbrick surfaces, requiring annual repairs after winter storms. Some kings listed temple renovations among their chief accomplishments, showing how upkeep remained a royal responsibility centuries after initial construction. This long-term commitment reveals how central ziggurats were to Sumerian identity. Temple complexes extended beyond the central tower. At Nippur, excavators found a walled precinct containing priestly residences, scribal schools, and craft workshops. Storage rooms held vast quantities of offerings, grain, textiles, and precious metals collected as taxes or tributes. These compounds functioned like self-contained cities within cities. The economic impact was substantial. Ziggurats required continuous supplies of ritual goods, supporting specialized industries. Goldsmiths crafted divine statues, weavers produced sacred garments, and brewers prepared ceremonial beverages. Even the smallest villages contributed livestock for sacrifices, tying the entire region into the temple economy. Architectural refinements appeared over time. Early ziggurats had simple rectangular bases, while later versions incorporated more complex shapes with projecting and receding facades. Some featured multiple staircases or subsidiary shrines at intermediate levels. These variations suggest competing theological ideas about how humans should approach the divine. Acoustic studies reveal another clever feature. The raised central shrines amplified priests' voices during ceremonies, allowing crowds below to hear chants and prayers. The brick construction created natural reverberation that would have enhanced ritual performances, an early example of architectural acoustics. Security measures protected sacred treasures. Hidden chambers within ziggurat walls stored valuable offerings. Some shrines had elaborate locking mechanisms, wooden doors barred with metal bolts, and sealed with clay impressions. These precautions show how religious and economic concerns intertwined in temple administration. The structures inspired emulation far beyond Sumer. Later civilizations from Babylon to Mesoamerica built stepped pyramids resembling ziggurats, though whether through diffusion or parallel development remains debated. The form clearly addressed some universal human impulse to build upward toward the divine. Modern engineering analysis sheds light on their longevity. Ziggurats' broad bases distributed weight effectively across unstable alluvial soil. The sloping walls better withstood wind forces than vertical ones would have. Even the choice of mud brick, often seen as primitive, has provided flexibility that helped the structures survive earthquakes. Why invest so heavily in these monuments? The answer lies in Sumerian cosmology. They believed their cities originated as sacred spaces where gods first brought civilization to humanity. Ziggurats recreated this primordial moment, artificial mountains where heaven and earth met. Maintaining these connections was essential for cosmic order and earthly prosperity. Priests performed elaborate rituals to sustain this bond. At dawn, they might place food before a statue representing the deity, feeding the god as one would a honored guest. Seasonal festivals reenacted divine myths, with processions moving between temples along carefully planned routes. Every act reinforced the invisible ties between human and divine realms. The structures also served practical, observational purposes. From their heights, priests tracked flood patterns in the river plains below. They monitored stars for omens. In auspicious dates, this blend of spiritual and scientific functions was characteristic of Sumerian thought. No sharp divide between religion and what we'd call practical knowledge. Today, the eroded mounds of ziggurats still dominate Iraq's flat landscape. What remains hints at their original grandeur: the faint lines of staircases and crumbling brickwork, fragments of colorful glaze clinging to weathered surfaces. These ruins continue to speak across millennia about human aspirations to reach beyond earthly limits. Yet for all their architectural genius, the Sumerians' most intriguing legacy might lie in clay tablets rather than bricks. The same hands that built ziggurats wrote detailed accounts of the gods who supposedly inhabited them, stories that would influence religious traditions across continents for ages to come. The ancient Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, powerful beings who descended from the heavens to shape human destiny. Traditional translations describe them as gods dwelling in the celestial heights, but some modern interpretations propose a startling alternative. What if these weren't merely mythological figures, but descriptions of something else entirely? Sumerian texts depict the Anunnaki with capabilities that seem extraordinary even today. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes them traveling in fiery chariots, while cylinder seals show figures wearing what look like bulky suits with strange headgear. In one account, the goddess Inanna flies through the heavens in a boat that travels without oars or sails. These depictions have led some researchers to question whether we're reading metaphors or actual observations. Mainstream scholars generally interpret these passages as symbolic religious imagery. The Anunnaki's celestial origins represent their divine nature, not literal extraterrestrial descent. Their chariots resemble those of other Near Eastern storm gods, not technological vehicles. Professor Samuel Noah Kramer, one of the foremost Sumerologists, viewed them as purely mythological beings, representing natural forces and human institutions. Yet the controversy persists due to puzzling details. Some texts describe the Anunnaki as initially uncomfortable with Earth's conditions, needing special garments to breathe our air. One tablet mentions they had to adjust the straps of their attire before walking among humans. Such passages read oddly for purely supernatural beings who shouldn't need physical accommodations. The debate largely hinges on translation choices. The Sumerian term shu can mean both breath and atmosphere, leading to different interpretations. Traditionalists render a line about Enki as he put on the divine aura, while alternative translators read it as he put on the breathing apparatus. Neither version proves definitively correct. Ancient languages often resist exact equivalency. Archaeological evidence offers no direct support for extraterrestrial contact. No recovered artifacts clearly depict spacecraft or advanced technology. Beyond Sumerian capabilities, the famous Ubaid lizard figures, sometimes cited as evidence of alien visitors, actually resemble conventional fertility statues found worldwide. Just with stylized features, cultural context complicates the picture. Later, Babylonian texts reduce the Anunnaki's prominence, merging them with local deities. This evolution suggests they originated as literary figures whose attributes changed with political and religious shifts. Had they represented historical encounters with actual beings, their characteristics might have remained more consistent across centuries. The astronomical references prove intriguing regardless of interpretation. Sumerians placed the Anunnaki's home on Nibiru, celestial body some associate with the hypothetical planet X. Their descriptions of its long, elliptical orbit could theoretically match a rogue planet, though no scientific evidence confirms such. A body exists in our solar system. Metallurgical details raise further questions. Certain texts speak of the Anunnaki processing gold with methods sounding suspiciously sophisticated. One passage mentions purification through fire and celestial water, which alternative researchers interpret as describing electrolysis, a technique mainstream history says wasn't invented until millennia later. Psychological factors may explain the persistence of these theories. Ancient astronaut ideas gained traction during the space age, reflecting contemporary fascination with interstellar travel. The 1968 book Chariots of the Gods popularized notions that early religions documented actual encounters with advanced civilizations, view most academics reject, but that continues capturing public imagination. Linguistic analysis reveals another layer. Many alien interpretations stem from translations by Zecharia Sitchin, whose work mainstream scholars criticize for taking liberties with Sumerian grammar. His rendering of the term Inona as those who from heaven to earth came constitutes a minority view. Most experts translate it more simply as princely offspring or heavenly seed. Some supposed anomalies have conventional explanations. The Sumerians' sudden advancements in agriculture and technology resulted from accumulated knowledge along fertile river valleys, not outside intervention. Their irrigation systems and ziggurats demonstrate impressive engineering but remain within human capability given enough organized labor. The biological argument also falters under scrutiny. Proponents claim Sumerian skulls show unusual elongation, suggesting alien hybrid ancestry. But forensic analysis reveals these resulted from intentional cranial deformation, a widespread ancient practice achieved by binding infants' heads. Similar shaped skulls appear across unrelated cultures, with no connection to Mesopotamia. Astronomer Carl Sagan once noted that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. While unexplained aspects of Sumerian culture persist, no smoking gun confirms extraterrestrial contact. The absence of technological artifacts or unambiguous biological evidence leaves the ancient astronaut theory in speculative territory. Perhaps the most compelling counterargument comes from Sumer's own intellectual achievements. Their invention of writing, mathematics, and urban planning shows a culture fully capable of independent innovation. To credit these accomplishments to outside forces risks undervaluing human ingenuity, the very quality that made Sumerian civilization remarkable in the first place. Still, certain details resist easy explanation. The Sumerians' precise astronomical knowledge seems oddly advanced for their era. One tablet describes Jupiter's moons invisible to the naked eye with accuracy that would require telescopic observation. Mainstream historians attribute this to mathematical coincidence or scribal errors, but the parallels remain eerie. The debate ultimately reflects our own cultural moment as much as ancient realities. In an age of rapid technological change, we project our own experiences onto the past, seeing spaceships where earlier societies saw divine chariots. The same impulse that once interpreted eclipses as angry gods now interprets myths as alien encounters. Archaeological methodology adds another wrinkle. Early excavators sometimes forced finds into biblical frameworks, while later ones applied space-age interpretations. Current researchers caution against both extremes, insisting artifacts should speak for themselves without modern ideological filters. What makes the Anunnaki mystery endure isn't any single piece of evidence, but the cumulative weight of unanswered questions. Why do so many ancient cultures share stories of gods descending from the sky? How did the Sumerians develop concepts like genetic engineering metaphors millennia before modern biology? Coincidence seems less satisfying than connection even? If the nature of that connection remains unclear, the controversy also underscores how little we truly understand about Sumerian thought. Over 500,000 cuneiform tablets remain untranslated, each potentially holding new insights. Recent digital imaging techniques reveal previously illegible texts, constantly expanding our knowledge base. Tomorrow's discoveries could reshape today's debates. Perhaps the wisest approach is neither wholesale acceptance nor dismissal, but humble acknowledgement of how much we don't know. The Sumerians left behind cryptic clues about their beliefs, but the full context may be lost to time. Their own writings suggest they understood these matters better than we ever might. One thing remains certain: dismissing Sumerian texts as mere fantasy misses their deeper value. Whether myth or encoded history, these stories shaped civilization's development. Their flood narratives influenced the Bible's Noah story. Their legal concepts underpin modern justice systems, and their literary techniques still inform storytelling today. The Anunnaki mystery may never resolve to everyone's satisfaction, but pursuing these questions keeps ancient Sumer vibrantly alive in our collective imagination, not as a dead civilization, but as a continuing conversation between past and present. Their voices still speak through clay tablets, if we have ears to hear what they're truly saying. Far from diminishing Sumerian achievements, this ongoing discussion underscores their cultural richness. A society that could inspire debates for 1,000 years after its fall must have possessed extraordinary depth. The same people who invented writing and the wheel clearly had more to teach us about themselves, and possibly about something even greater. However one interprets the Anunnaki, their legacy continues shaping our world in tangible ways. Modern timekeeping stems from their basic math. Our concept of cities traces back to Yor and Uruk. Even the word Anunnaki now permeates popular culture, appearing in films, video games, and music, proof that these ancient figures still capture modern minds. Perhaps that's the real lesson here. The Sumerians created narratives powerful enough to span millennia, flexible enough to absorb new meanings in every age. Whether as gods, metaphors, or something else entirely, the Anunnaki remain relevant because they speak to eternal human questions about our origins and purpose. Their most enduring gift might be teaching us how to wonder. The story begins with a king who ruled too harshly. Gilgamesh of Uruk, 2/3 god and 1/3 man, pressed his people with endless construction projects, and the Droit du Seigneur claiming brides on their wedding nights. The citizens, cried out to the gods, who responded in an unexpected way. They didn't smite the tyrant, but created his mirror, Enkidu, a wild man raised by animals. This counterbalance suggests the Sumerians already understood complex ideas about checks and power structures. It's embedded in a narrative 4,000 years before modern political theory. What happened next established. Pattern stories still follow today. Gilgamesh and Enkidu's epic battle shakes the city walls, but ends with mutual respect. They transition from rivals to friends, embarking on heroic quests, a template later seen with Achilles and Patroclus. Batman and Robin, their first adventure, involves cutting down the sacred cedar forest guarded by the monster Humbaba. The psychological depth here is striking. Enkidu hesitates, filled with foreboding, while Gilgamesh charges ahead. This contrast between intuition and recklessness plays out in countless adventure tales since. The story takes a darker turn when the gods punish their success. Enkidu suffers a lingering death, shown in horrifying detail on the tablets. His body withers over 12 days as Gilgamesh watches helplessly. This graphic portrayal of mortality shocked early translators, who expected ancient myths to soften death's reality. Instead, the text forces readers to confront decay, with Gilgamesh crying, "My friend's corpse is covered in maggots like an old garment." Such unflinching realism makes the epic feel startlingly modern. Gilgamesh's response to loss-shaped literary archetypes. He abandons his kingdom to search for eternal life, wearing animal skins and wandering the wilderness. Motif later echoed by biblical prophets and medieval saints. His journey to find Utnapishtim, the flood survivor who gained immortality, introduces another groundbreaking concept: the wise old man who holds secret knowledge. Seen later in characters from Merlin to Obi-Wan Kenobi. The flood story within. The epic predates the biblical version by at least 1,000 years, yet shares uncanny similarities. Utnapishtim describes being warned by the god Ea to build a giant ark and save the seed of all living creatures. He releases birds, too. Find land after the waters recede. The parallels are too exact to dismiss, suggesting Mesopotamian traditions influenced Hebrew scriptures. Yet the Sumerian version lacks moral justification. The gods send the flood because humanity's noise disturbs their sleep. Not as punishment for wickedness, Gilgamesh's ultimate failure to achieve immortality delivers one of literature's first existential lessons. Utnapishtim challenges him to stay awake for 7 days to prove his worthiness, but the exhausted king fails immediately. Later, a serpent steals the magical rejuvenating plant Gilgamesh finally obtains. The message is clear. Death defines human existence. This philosophical conclusion, written when Egypt's pyramids promised eternal life, shows the Sumerians grappling with mortality in profound ways. The epic circulated widely across the ancient world. Archaeologists have found fragments in Turkey, Syria, and Israel, translated into multiple languages over to millennia. A Hittite version changes the gods' names, but keeps the plot intact, proving the story's adaptability. Even the Babylonians, who typically altered Sumerian texts to fit their cosmology, preserved Gilgamesh's narrative nearly unchanged, testament to its power. Modern readers often notice progressive elements. The character Shemhat, the temple priestess, who civilizes Enkidu through 6 days of lovemaking, demonstrates sexual agency rare in ancient literature. Her success, where hunters failed, suggests the Sumerians valued feminine wisdom alongside masculine strength. God. The goddess Ishtar's vengeful rage, when Gilgamesh rejects her advances, presents a nuanced portrait of divine femininity, both creative and destructive. The epic also pioneered narrative techniques we now take for granted. Flashbacks reveal Gilgamesh's dreams forecasting Enkidu's arrival. Parallel dialogues show different perspectives on events. Extended metaphors compare life to fragile objects. Mankind's days are numbered, whatever he may do, like dragonflies floating downstream. These literary devices wouldn't become common until much later periods. Gilgamesh's psychological transformation marks another innovation. He begins as a bully, matures through friendship, faces despair, and ultimately finds wisdom in accepting limits. This character arc predates similar developments in Greek drama by 15 centuries. His final realization, "The life you seek you never will find," resounds. Like a line from Shakespeare or Camus, the text's physical form shaped its survival. Cuneiform tablets' durability preserved the epic better than perishable scrolls could have. Standardized scribal training ensured accurate copies across generations. One amusing detail: later school tablets contained student errors where young scribes miswrote lines, proving ancient classroom struggles mirror modern ones. Some sections remain mysterious. Tablet gaps leave key scenes conjectural, like the nature of the stone things Gilgamesh carries into the underworld. Scholars debate whether certain passages describe actual mental illness, as when the devastated king circles Enkidu's body like a lioness deprived of her cubs. The ambiguity invites multiple interpretations, keeping the text alive for new analyses. The epic's worldview reflects Sumerian values. Gilgamesh gains fame not through conquest, but building uruks, magnificent walls echoing Mesopotamia's focus on urban infrastructure. His quest concludes with him admiring these same walls, suggesting human achievement outlasts individual lives. This civic pride permeates the text. From detailed descriptions of the city's bricks to its sacred orchards, strikingly, the gods themselves appear limited and conflicted. When Enlil orders Enkidu's death for killing Humbaba, the sun god Shamash protests the injustice. This divine disagreement mirrors human courts debating laws, perhaps reflecting Sumer's emerging legal systems. The gods seem more like powerful beings with flaws than omnipotent forces. An unusual perspective in ancient theology. Musicologists have reconstructed possible melodies for the epic songs using surviving hymn notation. These haunting compositions, played on reconstructed lyres, underscore how performances likely blended poetry with music, an early multimedia experience. The text itself references singers and instruments, suggesting public recitals were common. Gilgamesh's influence extends beyond literature. Psychologists reference his journey when discussing grief processing. Philosophers cite his arc when examining the search for meaning. Military academies sometimes study his leadership lessons, both positive and cautionary. Few ancient works remain this relevant across so many disciplines. The story's rediscovery in 1853 revolutionized biblical scholarship. When archaeologists unearthed the flood tablet in Nineveh, it forced reconsideration of Genesis's origins. Suddenly, key Judeo-Christian narratives had traceable antecedents in Mesopotamia. This discovery reshaped academic understanding of cultural transmission across the ancient Near East. Modern authors continue reimagining the epic. Recent retellings cast Gilgamesh as everything from a post-apocalyptic warlord to a spacefaring hero. Graphic novels visualize the fantastical elements, while stage adaptations emphasize its psychological depth. Each interpretation proves the story's adaptability to contemporary concerns. Underlying all is the simple power of the writing itself. When Gilgamesh laments, "My friend, whom I loved, has turned to clay," the raw emotion transcends time. The description of dawn spreading across the sky like a yellow cloth demonstrates observational brilliance. These moments connect us directly with an ancient poet's sensibility across 40 centuries. Perhaps the epic's greatest innovation was presenting contradictions unresolved. It celebrates civilization's achievements while acknowledging nature's. Pul values fame yet recognizes its emptiness, fears death, but finds purpose in mortal endeavors. This complexity makes Gilgamesh's story feel startlingly contemporary. Despite its archaic origins, yet for all its literary brilliance, the epic was just one facet of Sumerian intellectual life. The same culture that produced this masterpiece also built schools, training scribes in mathematics, law, and administration, systematizing knowledge in ways that would shape later societies. Our educational methods reveal another aspect of Sumer's enduring legacy. Across Sumer's bustling cities, a rare privilege awaited select children admission to the Edaba, or tablet house. These early schools didn't teach reading and writing to everyone. They trained future scribes, administrators, and temple officials in an intensive curriculum that blended rote memorization with harsh discipline. The system created a literate class powerful enough to run cities, but excluded most of the population from its hallowed halls. A typical school. Day began at dawn. Students sat on reed mats in cramped courtyards, forming cuneiform signs in fresh clay. Master scribes dictated texts aloud, while pupils struggled to reproduce the complex wedges. Lessons started simply horizontal, vertical, and diagonal strokes, drilled endlessly until perfect. Advanced students copied real legal documents or literary works like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Archaeology reveals their progression through layered practice tablets, some bearing frustrated teachers' corrections in smaller script. The curriculum extended beyond basic literacy. Mathematics tablets show complex problems involving division of estates or calculating brick quantities for construction projects. One tablet from Nippur poses a riddle about 7 brothers inheriting silver, requiring fractional division long before Greek mathematicians formalized such concepts. Students memorize standardized forms for contracts, letters, and temple records practical skills for bureaucratic careers. Discipline was severe. A surviving school text humorously lists punishments. My teacher made me do extra copies. Hit my fingers with a reed. Caned my back. Another describes a student begging his mother to invite the teacher for dinner with gifts, a bribe for better treatment. This rigorous environment suggests education was seen as painful, but necessary transformation. Access depended entirely on birth. Temple officials and wealthy merchants could secure places for their sons. The occasional talented commoner might gain entry through patronage, but most never saw inside an Edaba. This exclusivity made literacy a potent tool for maintaining elite status. Those who mastered cuneiform controlled law, religion, and commerce, all recorded in the scripts. Intricate wedges. School texts reveal how knowledge reinforced social hierarchy. One exercise lists professions in order of importance: king, priest, scribe, then craftsmen, and laborers. Another details proper etiquette when serving noble patrons. Education wasn't about enlightenment, but producing competent administrators who'd uphold existing power structures. Scribal training took years. Advanced students specialized, some becoming legal experts composing contracts, others mastering temple accounting systems. The best graduates earned prestigious positions tracking royal taxes or managing temple warehouses. Their skills commanded respect, one proverb states. The scribe's hand is his fortune, an early recognition of education's economic value. The methods seem familiar today. Teachers used mnemonics, repetition, and peer correction. One vocabulary list groups related words, plants, cities, gods like modern flashcards. Students memorized standard phrases before composing original texts, much as children now learn. Sentence structures. Even the stress over final exams appears in complaints about fearsome examination days. Writing wasn't just a technical skill, it shaped thought itself. Cuneiform's complexity forced systematic reasoning. Mathematical tablets show step-by-step problem solving. Legal texts demonstrate precise distinctions between similar cases. This training produced minds capable of administering cities with unprecedented organization. Schools also functioned as cultural centers. Older students studied literature, music, and debate alongside practical skills. Some Edaba texts contain philosophical dialogues questioning divine justice, astonishing. Depth for vocational training. This blend of arts and administration suggests Sumerians saw bureaucracy as intellectual work. It's not mere record-keeping. Graduates formed a self-perpetuating class. Successful scribes trained their own apprentices, often family members. Dynasties of literate officials emerged, their status preserved across generations. This created remarkable continuity tablets from your show similar. Administrative formats used for centuries with little change. The system's brilliance lay in its standardization. Across Sumer's rival city-states, scribes used identical signs, measurements, and document formats. A contract from Lagash followed the same structure as one in Uruk. This consistency enabled complex trade. and diplomacy between cities that often warred with each other, schoolhouses themselves became institutions. Excavations at your uncovered rooms filled with discarded practice tablets, ancient equivalents of notebook pages. The walls still bore brick inscriptions naming headmasters. Some buildings had special shelves for storing reference texts early, counterparts to school libraries. Literacy's power is evident in what wasn't written. Farmers didn't need cuneiform to plant crops. Builders didn't consult tablets to lay bricks. But without scribes recording harvests and work assignments, cities couldn't function. This dependency gave Idaba graduates disproportionate influence. Despite rarely holding formal political power, women were almost entirely excluded. A handful of priestesses and royal daughters learned cuneiform, but no evidence suggests ordinary girls attended school. Their education likely focused on domestic crafts, textile work. Tablets mention female supervisors, but their literacy remains uncertain. The system's rigidity may have contributed to Sumer's eventual decline. Later Babylonian schools show more innovation, suggesting Sumerian education became too conservative. When new challenges arose, generations trained to copy old formulas may have struggled to adapt. Yet for centuries, this method produced administrators who managed history's first complex societies. Surviving homework offers intimate glimpses into student life. One tablet contains a child's shaky first attempts at writing, another a crude doodle interrupting a serious exercise. A particularly poignant example bears the note. "My teacher said I did bad work today," proof that classroom anxieties transcend millennia. The Idaba's legacy extends far beyond Mesopotamia. Later civilizations adopted similar scribal. Schools, from Egypt's House of Life to medieval European monasteries, the idea that specialized education sustains governments became fundamental to every advanced society. Modern universities, for all their differences, still serve this original bureaucratic purpose. Meritocratic elements occasionally surfaced. Some tablets praise students who surpassed their teachers. A few even criticize lazy pupils squandering privileged opportunities. These hints suggest that even in rigid systems, talent could sometimes overcome birth. An early whisper of ideals later. Societies would amplify. The costs of this exclusivity were significant. By restricting literacy, Sumerians limited innovation to a small group. Contrast this with later Greek cities, where broader education fueled philosophical and scientific revolutions. Yet for their time, the Idaba system worked remarkably well until external pressures overwhelmed it. Recent excavations continue uncovering school materials. At Mari, archaeologists found a classroom frozen in time-abandoned tablets still stacked where students left them. Chemical analysis even detected fingerprints in the clay, ghostly reminders of long-gone children mastering a difficult craft. Professional pride shines through scribal texts. One graduate boasts of dining with nobles thanks to his skill. Another inscription declares, "The scribe is the star of all crafts," an early example of educated elites celebrating themselves. This self-awareness marks a cultural shift where knowledge joins strength and wealth as sources of status. The system's efficiency appears in mundane records. Warehouse inventories track jars by capacity and contents. Worker rosters note absences excused by illness. These meticulous documents demonstrate how scribal training enabled precise resource control, the lifeblood of urban civilization. Ultimately, the Idaba's greatest achievement wasn't producing individual scholars, but creating history's first administrative class capable of managing complex societies. Their record-keeping allowed rulers to govern beyond personal oversight. Standardized practices built systems outlasting dynasties. In many ways, modern bureaucracy remains their distant descendant, but even the most sophisticated systems falter. As we'll see, Sumer's educated elites couldn't forestall the civilization's eventual collapse. Though they documented its decline in careful cuneiform records until the very end, the year 2004 BC marked the beginning of the end for Sumerian political power. Elamite warriors descended on your breaching walls that had stood for centuries. They plundered temples, toppled statues, and dragged the last Sumerian king into captivity. Meanwhile, Amorite tribes from the west filtered into Mesopotamian cities, gradually taking control of infrastructure. Yet something remarkable happened. While Sumer's political independence ended, its civilization didn't disappear. Conquerors became the conquered in cultural terms, adopting the very systems they'd overthrown. When the dust settled, the Babylonian Empire emerged as the new regional power. But beneath its Amorite rulers pulsed Sumerian ideas. Hammurabi's famous law code owed its structure to Ur-Nammu's earlier template. Babylonian architects continued building ziggurats, just with different names. Scribes still trained in cuneiform, even as the spoken Sumerian language faded away. This cultural absorption wasn't accidental. The Babylonians recognized superior systems. When they saw them, the Epic of Gilgamesh offers a prime example of this continuity. Babylonian scribes copied and adapted the Sumerian epic, adding their own flourishes but preserving its core. They didn't just translate the text, they internalized its themes of mortality and human ambition. Similar adoptions occurred across disciplines. Babylonian mathematicians expanded Sumerian base 60 calculations into sophisticated astronomical predictions. Their irrigation engineers maintained the same canal networks. Sumerians had pioneered. Evidence of this cultural transfer appears in mundane records. A clay tablet from Sippar shows Babylonian administrators using Sumerian accounting formats generations after Sumer's fall. The layout, measurements, and even turn of phrase mirror earlier Sumerian documents exactly. Another tablet lists Sumerian loanwords in Babylonian business. Contract terms for legal concepts and bureaucratic processes the newcomers lacked words for. Language tells a revealing story. While Akkadian replaced Sumerian as Mesopotamia's, spoken tongue cuneiform remained the writing system for 2,000 more years. Scholars compare it to how Latin persisted in medieval Europe long after Rome fell. Babylonian scribes studied Sumerian as a formal language, much like European monks learned classical Latin. School tablets show them copying archaic Sumerian vocabulary list, preserving knowledge few could still speak or fully understand. Ziggurats physically embodied this cultural blending. Babylonians rebuilt temples Sumerians had constructed, simply rededicating them to their own gods. Marduk replaced Enlil atop the pantheon, but the rituals performed in his honor followed Sumerian patterns. Archaeological layers show continuous use of sacred sites, new bricks laid over old. Different names carved into similar altars. Political propaganda mimicked Sumerian styles too. Rulers like Hammurabi continued the tradition of inscribing their deeds on stele and temple walls. Their boasts of restoring justice and order echoed Sumerian royal pronouncements, virtually word for word. Even military tactics showed Sumerian influence. Babylonian chariots maintained the same wheel design first seen in centuries earlier. The question isn't why. Sumer fell, all civilizations eventually do, but why its legacy proved so tenacious. Geography offers partial explanation. Mesopotamia's river valley environment required collective management no matter who ruled. Complex irrigation systems and urban infrastructures demanded specialized knowledge that couldn't be easily replaced. The conquerors essentially had to adopt Sumerian methods or watch cities starve, but environmental determinism only goes so far. The Elamites came from a similar climate, yet failed to impose their own systems. What truly preserved Sumerian culture was its sheer effectiveness. From legal codes to lunar calendars, their solutions just worked better than alternatives. Later cultures didn't copy Sumer out of nostalgia. They did it because these were the best available tools for running complex societies. Consider medicine. Babylonian healers continued using Sumerian herbal remedies because they proved effective. A cuneiform tablet from Larsa lists prescriptions identical to earlier Sumerian ones: willow bark for inflammation, henbane for pain relief. This wasn't blind tradition. It was practical knowledge preserved across political upheavals. Trade networks also helped spread Sumerian innovations far beyond their homeland. Merchants carried standardized weights and measures throughout the Near East. The shekel, originally a Sumerian unit of weight, became a Near Eastern standard. Cylinder seals with Sumerian-style designs appear in Anatolia and the Indus Valley. showing how commercial practices spread the civilization's influence. Religious ideas traveled these same routes. The Sumerian flood myth transformed into the Babylonian epic of Atrahasis, then later influenced the Hebrew story of Noah. Each retelling adjusted details, but the core narrative remained recognizable. Similarly, Sumerian astral theology shaped how later cultures associated gods with planets, a legacy extending through Greek and Roman times into modern astrology. Even Sumer's failures proved instructive. Archaeological evidence suggests soil salinity from over-irrigation reduced agricultural yields in later centuries. Babylonian land management texts explicitly reference this problem. Showing awareness of Sumer's environmental miscalculations, they adjusted water management techniques accordingly, learning from Sumerian mistakes as well as successes. Administrative continuity is particularly striking. The same clay tablet forms used in Ur's warehouses appear in Babylonian storerooms. Centuries later, counting symbols for grain, livestock, and labor hours stayed essentially unchanged. This bureaucratic conservatism provided stability. During political transitions, tax collectors didn't care who sat on the throne, as long as the ledger books balanced. The military offers an exception that proves the rule. Maintained Sumerian infrastructure, they revolutionized warfare. Lighter chariots with spoked wheels replaced Sumer's cumbersome battle wagons. Tactics shifted to favor mobile archers over infantry formations. This selective innovation, keeping what worked, improving what didn't, demonstrates pragmatic cultural adaptation. Artistic styles show similar selective borrowing. Babylonian cylinder seals retained Sumerian craftsmanship techniques, but incorporated new motifs like mythological beasts. Temple statues kept the wide-eyed Sumerian aesthetic, but featured Amorite facial features. This blending created a distinct Babylonian culture, neither wholly Sumerian nor completely new. Perhaps most remarkably, Sumerian education methods survived nearly intact. Babylonian Oedipus schools used the same vocabulary lists and math problems as their Sumerian predecessors. Student tablets from both periods show identical errors, proof that teaching techniques passed down unchanged. This educational continuity helps explain how Sumerian knowledge persisted across centuries. The final irony may be that Sumerian culture outlasted its successors. When Persian conquerors arrived millennia later, they found administrative systems still bearing Sumerian fingerprints. Even today, our 60-minute hours and 360-degree circles descend from Sumerian math. Their urban planning concepts underlie modern cities, and their legal principles inform contemporary justice systems. Sumer's fall teaches that civilizations don't simply vanish, they transform. Political control shifted, languages evolved, gods changed names, but the foundations Sumer laid remained. Every time you check the clock or sign a contract, you're interacting with ideas first codified in ancient Mesopotamia. The Sumerians may have ceased to exist as a distinct people, but their solutions to civilization's fundamental problems prove too useful to disappear. Which brings us back to our original question: how did history's first civilization manage achievements no one matched for centuries? Perhaps the answer lies in their restless ingenuity, that rare ability to see problems not as fixed realities, but as challenges awaiting solutions. The Sumerians didn't just build cities. They built concepts, tools, and systems so effective that even their conquerors couldn't imagine life without them. Their true monument isn't in eroded ziggurats or clay tablets, it's in the invisible architecture of modern life. Every organized society stands on foundations the Sumerians laid. Political revolutions come and go, cultures rise and fall, but once certain discoveries are made, writing, law, mathematics, humanity never loses them completely. The wheel keeps turning, the calendar pages flip, stories get retold. The first civilization's fingerprints remain everywhere we look. The Sumerians laid the foundation of civilization, writing, cities, laws, and then vanished beneath the sands. Their achievements were so advanced that cultures borrowed them for millennia without even knowing where they came from. Wheeled to epic poetry. Their fingerprints are all over modern life. Archaeologists still uncover cuneiform tablets revealing lost innovations, precise math, early medicine, even beer recipes. Yet the biggest mystery remains. How did they appear with mastery of such complex systems seemingly out of nowhere? Perhaps their true legacy isn't just what they built, but the questions they left behind.
Ow.
How did one civilization leap so far ahead, and why did it take the world thousands of years to catch up? If you found this fascinating, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Forgetting Scrolls for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries. The past has more secrets than we can imagine, and we're just getting started.